I have no idea if Prot Warriors are gonna get invited now with their recent buffs. I don't have a clue. I think a lot of people don't 100% understand why Vengeance Demon Hunters are mainly being played in M+. I mean, of course they do like a decent amount of damage. Like, of course Demon Hunters do like they do decent damage, so that's a reason why they're played. But the much bigger reason why they're played is because they give you a magic damage increase. They apply a magic damage increase to the targets, which makes the Moonkin and the Mage do more damage. So if you replace your Vengeance Demon Hunter with a different tank, not only do you need to do more damage than the Vengeance Demon Hunter, you also need to, or the same damage than the Vengeance Demon Hunter, you need to do so much more damage than the Vengeance Demon Hunter to make up for the missing magic buff that the Mage and the Moonkin lose. Right? If you're doing high keys or if you're doing like stuff like the MDI or whatever. Or you invite a Havoc Demon Hunter. Like that's the other option, I guess. The other option is you're inviting a Havoc Demon Hunter. And if you're not talking about the MDI or high keys, then Warriors were just fine before that buff too. Like if you're not talking about min-maxing stuff, like the highest of the highest key players or like stuff like the MDI speedrunning, then Warrior was just fine to play. The problem, of course, is that it doesn't matter if your class is fine to play or not. It matters if you get invited or not. And that's a different kind of story. Okay, I get it that you think it's frustrating that there's something like Raider.io. But the problem is not Raider.io. Like, people like Raider.io. Like, the only reason why people do high keys is because of Raider.io. Like, you can't just remove something because people are stupid. You can't just say, oh, I'm not getting invited because I don't have high Raider.io, and therefore I want Raider.io to be gone. Like, it's like saying remove the arena ladder because you're not getting invited to an RBG or something. Because you don't have high arena rating. Or remove the arena ladder because I'm not getting invited to like a 3 versus 3 group. You have to change your mindset. If you don't get invited to a group, then you're not supposed to be blaming the system. You're supposed to be blaming the people that are the community perception that is just wrong. But you can't blame the data just because people are using it wrong. The fact that the statistics exist is not the issue. The issue is that people are reading it wrong. No, it's the system, because the system data has created the false perception that if you don't have 2200 rating, then you suck. That's the community that has this perception, not the data. The data is not saying if you're below 2k, you suck. That's not at all what the data is saying. If you go to Raider.io, then there's more than enough information and numbers that you can use in a perfectly correct way. It could be a ranking system tracking your performance besides your overall Rio. I think that would help. But how would you track your performance? Like, I don't think that's something you can actually track. DPS / damage taken, that's not really how... that's not... Like, M+ is more than just damage and damage done and damage taken. It's much more than that, right? Like, just because I avoid every mechanic and do a lot of damage doesn't mean I'm good at M+. Maybe I don't use a single utility spell ever. Maybe I don't interrupt one time. Maybe I use all of my cooldowns when I have the Pride buff instead of using it on the Pride to not wipe, you know? Like, maybe I'm a mage and I never combust the Pride, so I can get more damage after the Pride is done, so I get a better performance score. Like, that doesn't really work. But yeah, I mean, like, listen to me. Like, I totally understand that there's like a false perception of people, like when they create groups. But it's the same everywhere else too. When somebody makes a raid, a heroic raid, right? Then everyone's asking for you to already have curve, which sometimes is equally stupid. Especially if it's like the start of a new tier. Like sometimes a new tier comes out and people already ask for a curve like 2 days after the raid came out. And that's just like equally stupid. So what should we remove the curve achievement now? So people don't invite only curve players anymore? Like should we remove that? Should we remove the kill statistics from your like statistic tab? So people cannot see if you kill the bosses? Because otherwise you don't get invited? You know what I'm saying? Because don't get me wrong, I totally agree with you that people ask for a lot more than what you actually need. Like, I agree with you on that one. People ask for like a really high rated ATO, even though you don't need it for that certain key. And I agree, that's stupid. But the solution is not to just remove the score system. The thing with M+ is that just because you do higher keys, it doesn't mean like you don't need high key experience for like doing 15 dungeons. So, for example, I'm gonna give you a good example, okay? So let's say there's a person that only runs 15 keys, plus 15s. But a lot of them, okay? So this person is running 15 keys all day, every day. So this person has a lot of experience. Because this person has been running like all the dungeons so much. They haven't been running them on like 16, 17, 18, 19, but they have a lot of experience because they've been running the same key on 15 like a billion times, okay? Now, sometimes people queue up with different kinds of raid ATO, and the person that has done all those 15 keys might actually be a lot better because they have more experience than a person that has a higher rated ATO score, but only did the dungeons a few times on like a higher level, right? So in this case, a person that has the lower score might actually have more experience and do better than someone with a higher score. So, because what do people use rated ATO? Like, what's the most important thing in dungeons? The most important thing in dungeons is experience, right? Because the more you play a dungeon, the more you play the dungeons, the more you know about the dungeons, and the better you're probably going to be, right? That's like the number one thing that pretty much matters in M+. And your rated ATO score is usually an indicator of your experience. Because if you somehow manage to get a pretty high score, then you probably also have experience, because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to get that high score. Because of course, the higher the key that you do, the more difficult it is, and the better you have to play the mechanics, and the better you have to like deal with the mobs and everything, and the bosses. So if you have a high rated ATO score, it usually implies that you also have a pretty good experience in dungeons, and therefore you're probably gonna be doing well. Right? This is not always true, because sometimes a person might have just been spamming lower keys for whatever reason. You know, like maybe there's a person who doesn't like doing high keys, but they have a lot of experience with dungeons because they have been spamming 15 keys all day, every day, you know? So in that case, rated ATO being tied to experience is wrong. But the majority of the time, it is correct that your rated ATO score is tied to your experience. And that's usually what people are looking for in World of Warcraft, right? In WoW, people are usually looking for experience and not skill. Because skill is something that you can't really measure. There's no measurement for skill. So the only thing that you can put a measurement on is your experience. That's why people constantly ask for curve when you want to be invited to a raid, or people, when you apply to a guild, people ask for previous experience with like previous raids and what guilds you have been in and that kind of stuff. Because experience is almost like the most important thing in WoW. And rated ATO kind of is proof of experience. It's not that good of a proof because as I said, as like this example that I told you before, if there's a person that has been running 15 dungeons like a billion times, then their rated score might not be that high, but they still have like an insane amount of experience. So sometimes it's like not 100% correct. But that's why rated.io also added something to the score, which I always think, that's something I look at a lot. Like when I create a dungeon group, then I do look at the rated.io score, but I mainly look at the highest key they have done in that certain dungeon and how many keys they have done in a certain range. Like for example, if you look at my statistic here, my highest spires was at 25. And then you can see timed 20 runs 114, right? Like that's a lot. If it would be like 5 or something, like timed 20 runs 5, oh well, this person did not play that much. But you can see, like you can literally see the experience by looking at how many runs they had. So people just need to make sure they're reading this data properly. Because someone with a high score but has only run like 5 higher dungeons, it's probably worse than a person that has a lower score but has run like 100 dungeons above 15 or something, you know? And that's how I invite people. Like I always look at this like best for dungeon and like timed X runs, right? Because I think that is a much better indicator than the overall score. Oh my god, how many times am I gonna be looting this neck? Every time! Oh my god, he looted it double too! Johnny! That's a good looking angel! Feels bad. That's the wrong way to do it, in my opinion, because you're leaving out a whole another group that may be way better and doesn't get invited just because, as you say, they don't have experience, so that is why the system is not good. So you're telling me that I should not be looking at experience, but what am I looking at then? If experience is the #1 indicator of your skill level in WoW, like you have to understand that experience is the #1 indicator for your skill in PvE. Because what is PvE? You're playing against scripted mobs, NPCs and like bosses. You can be the best player in the world. If you don't know the boss's mechanics and the trash's mechanics, then you won't be reacting to it properly. Even if you're like a mechanical god, okay? Like you're literally the best player in the world, but you're doing a dungeon that you've never seen before for the first time, you're not gonna be performing that great probably. Because how would you be reacting to an ability that you don't know? You can't react to something you don't know properly. That's why sometimes PvP players that are really good at the game do a dungeon and they fail horribly. Or they go and raid and they fail horribly. Why is that? Because they're bad players? No. Because they just don't know the mechanics. And you need to know the mechanics to do well in PvE. That's like 80% of being good in PvE is just knowing everything about PvE. If you have run a dungeon only 2 times, you're not going to be performing as well as a person that has run this dungeon 100 times. No matter the skill level. That's just a fact, right? Because that's just how PvE works. You can have the best player in the world play the dungeon for the first time, and then like a pretty like average player that has run the dungeon 100 times, and the average player is probably going to do better. Because of that fact, right? So no, I'm not leaving out a player base that would be better. Because I'm just looking at the experience that a person has and inviting according to the experience. Because that's the most important thing in PvE. Like even if you disagree with me, even if you say, I don't think experience is the most important thing. Okay, let's just assume that. Then what would you be looking at then? Like how are you basing your invites then? Like if there's 20 people that queue up for your dungeon and you're not looking at experience, then what is it you're looking at? The problem is that people reject you for plus 15s when you've completed plus 12s and 13s. You do have experience with the dungeon, but it still doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you that it's like incredibly hard to get invited to keys. But I just disagree with you when you say the issue for that is the rated ATL score. Like, I just disagree with that. One issue that I thought about like a few days ago was the fact of the discrepancy between the amount of tanks that are available and the amount of DPS that are available. And that is actually like a pretty big problem when you think about it. Like when you create an M+ group, you have like 100 damage dealers that queue up and 1 tank. And this automatically creates a problem that you have like a sea of damage dealers, but only like very few tanks. And what happens when you have like a huge amount of pool of players to choose from? The more damage dealers there are available to you, the pickier you're going to be, right? Because of course everyone is like that. Of course you're gonna be like that. And don't say that you don't do that, like, because that's just wrong. Unless you're like completely anti-meta or something, and you're like purposely inviting people with less experience or whatever. But if you open up a group in the LFG tool, and there's 50 damage dealers that you can choose from, then of course you're gonna be like inviting the players that you consider the best. Right? Because why wouldn't you? That just makes sense. No matter what you're basing your opinion off. Like some people are basing their opinion off like highest item level. Some people are basing it off highest rated ATL score. Some people are basing it off certain classes. Like they think they need a mage or they think they need I don't know what. Right? But no matter what you're basing it off, you are going to invite the players that you think are going to be the best. Because you can. Because you have the possibility to be picky. Because there are that many people that queue up. That's why I'm saying that the fact that in a dungeon you need 1 tank, 3 DPS, 1 healer, while in the raid you have only 2 tanks for like 12 damage dealers. Or even more sometimes in a 30-man raid. In a 30-man raid, you have like 2 tanks on like 16 damage dealers or something. Maybe more even. It's like 20 damage dealers sometimes or whatever. So this discrepancy between like amount of tanks available and amount of like DPS available is like really huge. And therefore, there's just way too many damage dealers in comparison. I don't really see a solution to this problem, right? Like, I don't think there's a proper way of fixing this issue unless you... Unless you somehow change the rates so you need more than 2 tanks. That would be a fix maybe, because if you need more tanks in a raid, then you automatically would have more tanks in total, right? Because M+ and raiding kind of goes hand in hand. It's PvE, right? But the problem is every guild only has like 2 tanks. Because why would you have more than 2? But in M+, you need a lot more than just 2 tanks per 30 players, right? Here's an idea. Let's have Blizzard create a certain top tier group meta just for competition realms. And the dungeon base buff for the magic buff of demons so that every tank can do it. Well, at this point, you're just saying that buffs are bad, which I 100% agree with you. Buffs are always horrible. And I absolutely hate the fact that they exist. But then it's not... The solution is not to make a special dungeon where everyone has the magic buff. The solution is to remove the goddamn buffs. That's the solution. Well, you are wrong, because I started late this expansion, and even though I'm tanky, I'm not getting invited because I got low Ryo. But then you're probably queuing up to keys that you really don't have the experience for, though. Like, you guys are saying that you should just be invited to high keys without bringing any sort of experience. Like, it's like saying It's like complaining about people not inviting you to the Mythic raid, even though you haven't cleared Heroic. Like, it's like saying, oh, I started late in the expansion and I'm not even getting invited to Mythic Side or Nathrius. Just because I don't have any raiding experience. Yeah, you also just should be running your own key. If you really have an issue of getting invited, then just create a group for your own key, especially if you're a tank. The usual problem that people have when they create their own group is that they just have a hard time finding a tank. But if you're the tank, then creating your own group for your own key should be pretty easy. Like, you should be able to find 3 damage dealers and healers really easily for your key. What is the best way to get set experience so one can start doing the level of keys they are having trouble finding groups for? Would you say you need a core group of friends that you can tackle the challenges with first? That is always gonna be the best way of playing in Plus. It's definitely the best way to have a group that you can play with a lot. Like, that is 100% the best way. But I totally understand that people don't have groups, you know, like, it's not that easy to just find a group that always plays with you like that, you know? Like, that's not that easy. So, of course, that would be the number one solution. But if you don't have a group, then you do need to pug, right? Which, again, as I said before, of course, it's really hard to get invited to keys that you don't have the experience for. But then you just have to run the lower keys, right? Like, you just have to run the lower keys and run your own key. Like, just keep running your own key. And if it turns into a key that is like really hard, so let's say you're trying to get a certain Riddler score, and you need to do 15 keys, and your highest keys are like 14s. Then play your own key, and just always deplete it to 15 and make a group. You know, like, even if you manage to do a 15 in time, just deplete it to 15 again, and play that key. Just find a group, play that key, and then now you have increased your score eventually from 14 keys to 15 keys, right? And if you deplete a 15 key, well, then you just have to play a 14 key again. But you just need to, you know, like, you need to get it done. But yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not disagreeing with you guys when you say that people are not inviting you for stuff. People ask for a lot more rated at the score than it would be required for certain keys. Like, I agree with you on that one. Still doesn't mean that rated at is the issue, though. Another issue is that people are so focused on a certain meta that it's not even, like, the correct meta. Like, sometimes the community perception is just off. Like, it's just wrong. It's actually just straight up wrong sometimes. Like, when people think they need to run a Moonkin and a Mage for a plus 10 dungeon or whatever. Like, that's just literally wrong. But that's because the people are looking at high key players, see what comp they're running, and then think they also have to run that comp, or they think it's the best comp. People don't think about the fact that high keys require you to have different things than what you need in low keys. The best example is the MDI. Look at what the MDI is running, like what kind of comps, and compare it to the comps that people are running on high keys. They're completely different, right? Like, a group that is running really high keys, they're not playing MDI comps. Why is that? Why are the comps so different from, like, a plus 25 dungeon compared to a plus 18 dungeon? Well, it's simple. The damage that you need for these dungeons is just different. You need different damage profiles. Because certain classes are really good at, like, sustained AoE damage, right? So if you're pulling a trash pack and it's going to be alive for 2 minutes, certain classes are good at that. And other classes are not so good at that. But when you do a lower key, then you pull a trash pack and it survives for like 20 seconds. So all of a sudden, the classes that are good at that are different. Like, it's not the same class anymore. So yeah, a class that is good on high keys is not automatically also good on lower keys. That's something that the community thinks that it's not actually true. That's why in the MDI you don't see the same comp as in high keys, because the things that you need on high keys is not the same that you need on like lower keys. But that's also not something that Radar.io is at fault for, right? Because Radar.io is providing the brackets for you to look at. Like if you go to Radar.io.com, you can look at the certain key brackets and see what's good for what. Like you can go and look at plus 15 keys and see what people are running in 15 keys. It's just that people don't look at that. People look at streamers who do high keys and content creators. Like people are watching Smock do high keys, or they're watching Alice, me, or Dr. J do high keys, and then they think that's the setup they need. It's not Radar.io forcing people to have a wrong like class perception or something, or meta perception. Moonkins are really good on lower keys too. Okay, so if you compare Moonkin to like all other DPS specs in like a lower key, if all of them have equal gear and skill, then Moonkin is gonna get out DPS by like 50% of all other specs probably. Like there's so many specs that are better than Moonkin on lower keys. Trust me. Again, look at the MDI. Why do you think no one's playing Moonkin in the MDI? And they're playing 18 keys, that's not even that low. Right? That's not, and I'm talking about 15 keys, so that's even lower than what they play in the MDI. So I'm not saying that Moonkin is like horrible to bring in a low key, it's not. Of course, if you bring a Moonkin in a low key, it's gonna be fine. But people literally think they need a Moonkin because it's much better than other classes, which is just wrong. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, Fury is really good in lower keys. I mean, I've seen a survival hunter that out DPS'd me in a lower Spires key. That was not even long ago. It was like 2 days ago or yesterday. There was a survival hunter that out DPS'd me on a lower key. But yeah, again, I actually do think that the bigger problem is just like the sheer availability of people. Even if the community perception sometimes is wrong with certain classes. Like, I'm gonna give you one example actually. If I create a group for a plus 15 key, and then there's 2 damage dealers that queue up. One is goddamn, I don't know, Arcane Mage, and the other one is like a Fire Mage. And they both have the same Radar.io score. Then I might go with the Arcane Mage because, in my opinion, it's much more impressive to get a certain Radar.io score with an off spec. Because the main specs get invited to like almost everything, right? If you think about it. Like, if you're a Fire Mage or a Moonkin or like a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you get invited to all groups because you play the meta spec. An Arcane Mage is probably not getting invited to barely anything. Same goes with like, I don't know, like any other off spec. So if that off spec somehow managed to get a high score, like the same score as the other spec, then that just shows that you probably know how to play your class well, because you probably struggled to get there. Like you probably struggled a lot to even get to that score with the off spec that you played, right? While some flavor of the month classes, players are so bad, but they just get invited because they are playing the good class. Like, I see that all the time. Like, so many times you see a person that has like a high score or whatever, but then they're not actually good. They just got the score because they play a certain class that is considered good. I play Feral and LTBS most boomies in keys. Yeah, there you go. There's lots of specs who can do really well that are not considered meta, right? I remember Psy played Survival Hunter in the key and he did really well. Like he was like overall second on damage, almost competing with the mage. And he just like overall did really well in a key as Survival Hunter. But then they wiped because the tank died. That didn't have anything to do with the Psybear playing Hunter. And then they blamed him for depleting the key. Like they basically said something like, oh, I didn't see I didn't see we had invited a survival hunter. And then Psy was like, what do you mean? We just wiped because something completely unrelated. Like, it didn't have anything to do with me being survival. And I even was like number 2 on damage. And then he said, yeah, but he could have done even more damage if you would play MM. Oh, and when I watched it, I was like, no fucking way did he just say that. You could have done more damage, therefore it is your fault. That's like the dumbest thing. But yeah, again, going back to this, like, too many damage dealers just being available, man. If you would have a harder time finding damage dealers, then people probably wouldn't be that picky. People probably would be less picky. Oh, wait. Oh yeah, we're good. Right? Or is that just like... I think people would be inviting a lot more off-specs if there weren't that many people queuing up. But I guess there's nothing you can do to fix that, so... I guess there's no point talking about that. At least I can't really think of a system. Yeah, no, I can't really think of a system. The one thing that I always wanted was a queue. I always talked about this, like for years, I always wanted Blizzard to have a queue, an M+ queue. Because that would, in my opinion, solve so many issues. But I understand that it's not that simple. Like, it's not as simple as just adding a queue, right? Because they don't even have a queue for PvP. And for PvP it would make even more sense, I guess. Actually, maybe for PvE, maybe for M+ it would make more sense than for PvP, because setups don't matter as much as PvP, right? Yeah, so my idea was... Okay, so here, let me present to you my M+ queue idea, okay? So my idea was that you have 2 different queues. One is a high M+ key, like queue, where you try to do like high keys. And the other queue would be speedrunning keys. So you're doing like a lower key, but you try to do it as fast as possible. And you have these 2 different queue systems, where you can queue up by yourself, you can queue up with multiple people, whatever, like you can do whatever you feel like. And then the system puts you together with a comp that makes sense. Like, it shouldn't just be like 1 tank, 1 healer, 3 DPS. It should be a comp that somehow makes sense. That you have like everything that you could need, you know? Like, for example, if it's raging, then you should have someone who can dispel raging. You should have at least like 1 AoE stun. You should have a battle res. And you should have, you know, like, it should just make sense, the comp. And then like each person, and then you have like a rating system that is based off of this like queue. You have like a high key rating and a speedrun rating, right? So if you just want to be speedrunning keys, then you just speedrun them and you queue for that. If you want to do high keys, then you have a different like rating system for that. That was my idea, at least. And some people, like when I told this idea to my chat previously, then people were saying, no, I hate that idea. I still want to do keys with my group and stuff. And I wouldn't really like remove the possibility of doing the keys the way we do them now, right? Like, I think it should still be possible to do keys like with 5 people running to the dungeon and doing the dungeon, right? I think that should still be possible even if you do have like a queue system like that. Oh, and it could also be like a normal queue too. I forgot about that. I had that idea too. They could also be like a queue that is for like normal runs, like someone who doesn't care about rating or whatever. Like someone who literally just wants to do a dungeon. Oh yeah, you could also queue with your group, yeah. And the speedrun could be like a competition like the MDI, you know? That would also be funny, actually. Like, instead of having the speedrun queue award you with like a rating afterwards, it could be like a actual 1 versus 1, like the MDI, you know? So you queue up a speed run, and then you like have to play against another group. That would be cool, wouldn't it? And they could even make it so you can see the other players in your dungeon. Oh my god, that would be so cool! Imagine you're playing like a key against another team. Imagine you're playing a key against another team to see who can complete it faster. But then you can also see where they are. Like an outline of a character, you know? Like for example, like this. Like, because I'm in stealth right now, yeah? So you can see my character, but it's like half see-through. Like, it's like half opacity. That's how you could see the other people. You know? That would be so cool. So you can see where they are currently, approximately, in the dungeon. And maybe you could even see them on the minimap too. Like when you open the map, you can see like where they are. I understand this is probably never gonna be happening, but it still would be cool. In my opinion, that would be kind of cool. Without mics. One fucked up pull and someone leaves. You could have punishments for leaving if you have a queue system. That's totally... Just like something like in League of Legends, when someone leaves, you have like... what is it called again? Leaf Buster or something. Lever Buster. So it could like decrease your rating if you're leaving to prevent people from leaving. Yeah, I'm not talking about Dungeon Deserter because that would not be big enough of a punishment, I think. Like if you just have a debuff that you can't queue up anymore, I don't think that would be big enough of a punishment. I think you would have to need like something else even. Like if you leave, then you're gonna lose X amount of rating or something. Yeah, you could have a vote system for sure, like a surrender system. Yeah, I think that would totally be fine. Because if you play with your team and you can see that you're like super far behind compared to the other group, and you feel like there's no way of you making it, then you can totally have something like a surrender option or something, I guess. And I mean, yeah, there will always be trolls no matter the system, right? I mean, I agree. Of course, when there's a queue system, it won't be all sunshine and rainbow. Like, of course, there will be things that might not be so nice about it. But I personally think right now the biggest problem we have with M+ is just the way you have to form your groups, right? Like that's the number one thing people complain about the whole time. People constantly complain about not getting invited, blah blah blah, like people only look for meta classes, blah blah blah. Like that's the number one thing people complain about, right? And a queue system would solve that issue. It might create other issues, of course, right? A queue system might create other issues that we don't even know about yet. Maybe we'll create a problem that I haven't even thought of yet. But yeah, I mean that's just always gonna be a thing. There won't be like a perfect system probably. Okay, so one problem in my opinion about the whole Mythic Plus system is that some people are almost like forced to play in Plus, even though they don't actually like M+. I always thought that's a big problem for the M+ community. That there's people who actually don't even want to do it. And I always thought it was the weekly chest that caused this issue, right? In BFA and in Legion, we have a weekly chest that was determined, like you had to do a weekly M+ to be able to get your chest. But there was no other reason for you to play M+. So if you didn't like M+, you still had to do your weekly key to get that item. And that caused a lot of players to play M+ that didn't even want to play M+. Like lots of people didn't even want to do it, they just had to do it for the weekly key. So when they announced the weekly vault, I was actually really happy because I thought that would remove the amount of people that play M+ that don't actually want to do it. But I didn't realize that Blizzard is gonna mess up the difficulty levels, basically. Because right now, the difficulty to gain Mythic Plus to 26 items is a lot lower than the difficulty, respectively, in the raid vault and the PvP vault. Because, of course, it's much harder to kill 3 mythic bosses than it is to do 1 plus 14 key that you don't even have to do in time. You can literally deplete a 14 key and you get a 226 item. And in the raid, you have to kill 3 mythic bosses. Like, that's quite a bit of difference in, like, difficulty and effort, in my opinion. And in PvP, you have to be at 2.1k rating to get a 226 item, right? So in my opinion, the difficulty levels are, like, really off in the vault. And that's why people still feel like they have to play in Plus, even if they don't want to, right? Because it's much easier to unlock your vault in Mythic Dungeons than it is to unlock your vault in PvP or in the raid, right? Like, how many of you get a weekly and Plus done on all of their alts instead of killing 3 Mythic bosses or getting 2.1k rating? Like, surely there's lots of you, or lots of players, who feel like they have to do a Mythic Plus dungeon every week to unlock the vault, right? So we have the same problem that we already had in BFA and in Legion because of the difficulty discrepancies, right? It's actually just the same thing. Everyone, like, there's still a lot of people that don't really want to do M+, but they still feel like they have to do it for the vault, which creates this whole difference between people who want to get better at M+, and people who just want to do it to get it done. And of course, a person who is just doing it to get it done is not, like, trying as hard as someone who's actually trying to get better and to be improving in like a certain scenario, right? And that is also creating like a toxic environment where people put more importance onto your rated.io score, probably, right? Because someone that is not even trying properly, like someone who's not giving their best or giving their most, like the best performance because they don't really care about M+, they're not going to be doing that well. Like, let's say you are a raider. Let's say you really like raiding, but you don't like M+. Let's say you're a heroic raider, okay? You just barely didn't manage to go into Mythic yet, but you do definitely like heroic, and you're progressing in heroic. If you're a heroic raider, then you won't get 226 items from your vault through the raid, right? Because that's just not how it works. So you definitely are going to do dungeons. You're definitely going to do the 14 dungeons, the plus 14s, because that actually gives 226 items. The thing is, if M+ would be either a lot harder to obtain 226 items, or you would get 226 items easier in the raid, then that problem would be solved, right? Because then the heroic raider would do his heroic raid and unlock his items and be done with it. They wouldn't have to feel like, oh, now I'm gonna have to play 10 M+ dungeons because I need to unlock my M+ vault, you know? It either has to be like easier to get the higher items in the raid than in PvP, or Mythic Plus has to be harder. Like, it just needs to be adjusted somehow, because right now there's a pretty big discrepancy in difficulty between those. Yeah, as far as I know, don't quote me on this though. That's just what I somewhat pieced together from the information that I got from like Blizzard. The reason why the gear doesn't go higher in M+ with Valor points is, I think, because people don't wanna, like, Blizzard doesn't wanna add an achievement that is higher than plus 15. I think. Same with the vault too, in my opinion. Like, why is the vault giving the highest item level with like 14/15, even though that is much, much easier than the equivalent of raiding and M+? Like, if you really think about it, it doesn't really make much sense for them to do that. So I actually think the reasoning behind that is that they just don't want to go higher than 15, because right now there's absolutely no gain for doing a key that is higher than 15. Like, none from Blizzard's side. From Blizzard's side, there's absolutely nothing that you gain from doing a higher than 15 key. There's no achievement. You don't gain more valor points, you don't gain anything. The only thing that you gain is like the possibility of more shitty items that you don't even need anyway, because it's only to 10 item level. Like that's the only thing you gain. There's no achievements, there's no nothing, right? So if Blizzard says all of a sudden, hey guys, you have to complete 18 keys to unlock your 226 item from the vault, or hey guys, you need to do all dungeons on a plus 18 to be able to upgrade it to 226, then all of a sudden they would have to, you know, like balance classes a bit more within like M+. And not just that, they would also have to balance the dungeons within, like, between one another a bit more, which is probably also something that they don't necessarily want to do. Like, the difficulty difference between Sanguine Depths and, like, Mists of Turnasai, for example, like, that's a pretty big difference in difficulty, right? And then a 15, it may be, or a 14 or 15 key, maybe it doesn't matter as much, but the higher you go on the key level, the more the balancing actually matters, and I think Blizzard is just not willing to do that. Yet. I hope they change their mind eventually. But at the moment it really doesn't seem like they want to go higher than 15 for anything. They don't want to go higher 15 for Valor Point upgrades, they don't want to go higher than 15 for Vault, and so on. Specific stats like Resilience was back in the day are completely fine. You could go into PvP with PvP item and do a ton of damage, but you risk your back, and Resilience was useless in so you're forced to use. Yeah, but you're saying it's completely fine, and then you in the same sentence you're saying why it isn't fine. Ricky, like that's what I was talking about earlier. The biggest reason why Resilience or like PvP stats are a problem is not because of PvE players playing PvP. Because I agree with you, it's fine that you're not that strong if you're missing the PvP stat. But you have to also think about the fact that if you're a PvP player and you have like super good items for PvP, and then you go into PvE and like half of your stats are useless, then that really sucks. And that divides the player base even more, and Blizzard doesn't want to do that. Like Blizzard does not want to divide player bases. Like I understand why they don't want to do that. Like you don't want to put like a huge like wall between PvE players and PvP players and say, hey guys, if you're a PvP player, all of your items are going to be useless in PvE, and if you're a PvE player, then you can't step a foot into PvP, because that will just increase the barrier of entry really high up. So it creates this problem where people don't want to try out a different aspect of the game because their gear doesn't carry over, right? And that's just not a thing that Blizzard wants to do, and I understand why they don't want to do that. Oh my god, we got it with speed! Let's go! We got the speed, guys. Pog you. Do you need? Yes, I need. You should consider making a podcast. I already feel like I'm watching a podcast while listening to you. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I do ramble a lot. Yeah, I can definitely talk about a subject for like way too long. I know.